On today's show, LeBron James is not coming back to the Cavs, at least next summer. We'll talk about that and more on today's show. I want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, the music you heard on the way in, at least in audio form, is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA for places like Diamond Up Rocks and Estimations for the Sword. My co-host is Evan Damrell, covering the Cavs and the Cleveland sports scene at large for Facebook's Right Down Euclid. Producer Jake Stevens is not with us behind the virtual glass, but he did produce this episode as you're listening to it. Evan, this is, again, a very August thing, but we're going to do it because LeBron is so connected to the Cavs, so connected to what this team has done and accomplished and been the last 2 decades. He signed a 2-year extension with the Lakers last week. There is a player option for the second year that, opens the door for something there. We'll see what that is, or if anything. This means he won't be a free agent next summer, and the possibility of him returning to the Cavs next summer is off the board. This basically, to me, Evan, is not unexpected, but it takes a very big specter hanging over the season off the table. And honestly, I kind of don't really believe he's coming back again, which we'll talk about why I kind of think that is #good, which is maybe a hot take to say the greatest player ever or the second greatest player ever at worst. Not coming back is good for your franchise in some way, but that this is my contrarianness in that sense. But I'm not surprised that this is where this ended up. But him tweeting about Mark Price in August really felt more like some flirting more than anything else.
I think it was just, everything LeBron James says is calculated, it's tactical. He is very much Taylor Swift in his approach in terms of just publicity and using the media as a weapon.
Are the haters going to hate?
I would not be surprised if LeBron head bobbed in the back of his car listening to Shake It Off at one point, or Taylor's version, of course. But
if there's a video of LeBron, do you know that Russell Westbrook video where he's singing "You Won't Break My Soul," the Beyonce song? If there's a LeBron one of him singing the Taylor Swift thing, would love to see it instead of the times he's in the back of a car, someone is driving from just reacting to rap music. I'm I want to see LeBron listen to Taylor Swift. It would just be for the lulz. Continue.
Yes, it very much would be for the LOLs, as you said. But I think let's go back a little bit. So during All-Star, he spoke with Jason Lloyd of The Athletic and Joe Varden of The Athletic about just the possibility of rejoining the Cavs and said the doors never really shut on it. But people kind of ignored the key part of that story, and I think this sentiment is just still true now. He wants to either finish his NBA career or at least play the beginning of Bronny's NBA career if Bronny does make it to that point in his basketball career, because you just never know what can happen between now and the next 2 or 3 years. But LeBron's kind of made it explicitly clear, hey, I want to play with my son, and that doesn't mean he's like, yeah, that could be Cleveland, that could, I'm not saying the other team, but he said, yeah, that could be Cleveland, but it could be Oklahoma City, it could be Memphis, it could be blah, 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 blah. And that's just kind of the thing here, and I think a lot of people just ignore that aspect. I think just with how last season went with the Lakers and just maybe the Cavs fans at least having a little bit of relationship trauma, where LeBron kind of held their feet to the coals over every chance they got, where he only would sign those 1-year deals, except when he signed a 2-year extension and then bolted for Los Angeles. I think he was frustrated with how the Lakers season went last year. I think that's what the main thing with flirting with Cleveland publicly through All-Star was. It's just hey, Lakers, you could lose me if you guys don't fix this situation. And now the onus is on the Lakers to fix this Russell Westbrook situation and improve this roster to maximize however many years or at least injury-free games they have left with LeBron James on the roster, because we're starting to see time kind of take an impact and toll on his body too. But that's just kind of where I've always been at. And I wasn't surprised when I saw the news. I think I was expecting more dramatism from LeBron. Maybe he was going to drag this out a little bit, maybe hold the Lakers really accountable, because like there was no deadline for them to come to terms on an extension, but it also didn't mean like, hey, we still can't negotiate through the better part of the season. Like, he could have given this a trial run, but there's a lot of financial stuff off the court. I think his family is happy in Los Angeles. Like, his kids go to school there. There's like a lot of that's in play as well too. So I'm not surprised. And it's just like you said, I think if you're the Cavs, yeah, you'd love to have LeBron back, but I think a lot of what's just been said is like it had to be kind of on mutual terms instead of LeBron taking control of things. But now at least that's just one distraction that you didn't ask for or cause hanging over your head, and you can kind of just shift focus on what really matters, and that's trying to make the playoffs without LeBron for the first time in forever.
Yeah, a big segment 2 is like really, I think, kind of why, in something that Darius Garlands said has been sticking in my head when thinking about this, but it is, and there's a Ken Carman tweet that we're going to use as like a crux of some third segment discussion that I think is sort of I think a very I kind of wish Jake was here for this, as he's kind of the fan of us three, and I would like to like pick his brain on that a little bit. But I look at this and I just look at like where this could go in the future, and it's like the door is not like entirely closed, but this is like, I view this as, Evan, the door being more closed than it maybe ever has been in some way, right? Like maybe when he leaves and does the decision and all of that, the door felt very closed just because it was so raw at the time. And then we saw, and we know all the back channeling stuff that happened and all of that to make it possible to come back. I mean, it was his organization in a lot of ways when he was back, and then it kind of felt like he was leaving then. We're just at a point with him where time is running out. Like, if he's ever going to play for the Cleveland Cavaliers again, there's maybe just a couple of years left. Like, the LeBron NBA career is just getting close to the end. That's just the reality of this. The other part of it is that, like, the other part of it to me is just like wondering, is just like knowing that the last... There would be something really cool about the last game LeBron James ever plays in Cleveland being as a member of the team, and like not like a random like Wednesday in March.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree.
But that's also me. That's also me being local and selfish and wanting that cool moment to cover that in some way, right? Like, that's just me rooting for something cool.
No, I agree with that. I think just with how linked he is to the Cavs and their history, it would be a shame not to see the last time he really played, and not like just like one of those sentimental press conferences where LeBron holds up a Cavs jersey and then officially retires as a player, because he technically would retire as a Cavalier. Like, I want to see him have like that Kobe Bryant last game ever kind of game where like he just goes absolutely bonkers and just completely empties the tank, but it's in a Cavs uniform.
That feels like, that you see Kobe one feels one of one. That Kobe one really feels one of one. Yeah,
it does. It is 101, but you could see, bro, LeBron was hamming it up last time, and that's back when fans thought he might come back. Like, this was a few months ago. You and I were both there. I'm just like, oh my gosh, he is still a freight train at his age, first off, but second off, like, he was playing it up because he knew the fans were feeding into it. And I think LeBron's just corny enough and just like, again, is tactical about how he operates both on and off the court, that he would really have like a swan song, like, hey, this is my last game. I'm going to go out guns blazing at this point, get a triple-double, but it's going to be like the craziest triple-double you've ever seen.
Yes. Also, just like, again, the LeBron James, Mark Price stuff remains like a very funny thing to me.
Yeah, it's, I don't know.
Like, Mark Price is a legend. It was just like out of nowhere. It's like, yes, I'm going to praise Mark Price.
He might be trying to recruit Mark Price to fix Westbrook's jumper so he can actually be a three-point threat. Well, MKG was the first failure. Russell Westbrook will be the redemption.
Yeah, it's just July 24th, before he signed this extension, before that all kind of happened, and that's another word. It's man in all caps. Mark Price was so cold with 4 exclamation points and then like a bunch of flower bouquet emojis. Just, that was one of those moments where I'm just like, I see you, LeBron. I respect it. I respect your way of doing business. You never have to go through LeBron's tweets to figure out what he might be thinking about something. He just tweets it, or says something very subliminal about it, and I respect
Or
that.
he says, "I'm literally at a loss for words," and writes a small book as his Instagram caption.
Or
Let's cut the break.
or like carries around The Godfather for like months, and like I'm just like, okay, even though I'm very sure he didn't. It remains unclear to me if he read that book or not. But I digress. All right, after the break, we're gonna talk about my hot take, which is maybe not a hot take, which why like I kind of think there's a positive of this not happening for the Cavs. But first, gonna tell everyone about Rocket Money. Are you sick of managing your finances with buggy spreadsheets, or have an inbox overflowing with bills, or simply afraid of checking your bank statement? Then it's time you take back control of your financial life with Rocket Money, formerly Truebill, our favorite financial app. So why did Truebill change its name to Rocket Money? Well, we'll tell you what we heard here. Truebill, now backed by Rocket Companies, has grown from a bill management app into a full-on personal finance empowerment tool that helps over 3.4 million people with budgeting, lowering bills, canceling subscriptions, and more, saving each of their members, on average, $700 a year. And with all that growth comes the next evolution in Truebill's story, a new name. Bottom line, Rocket Money is everything that we've loved about Truebill, but with a fresh look and feel. Start canceling your unused subscriptions and save money at rocketmoney.com/lockedNBA. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedNBA, or download the app from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. That's Rocket Money. That's formerly Truebill. Go cancel those unused subscriptions right now. All right, back here in Locked On Cavs, I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Damerl. Evan, this is something that I, Chris Manning, maybe only partly believe. But here's just a thought that has been pinging around my brain, my very large stupid head. The Cavs can now just build with their young group, and there's no specter of LeBron in a way that like allows them to kind of figure this out for themselves. And like I think this young group is more interesting in a way than the young group LeBron came out and kind of wiped away, except for Kyrie before. So like I just look at this and say, I wonder if like Darius and Evan and Jarrett and like the guys they have, yes, there would be a ton of benefit from having LeBron around. I'm not going to deny that there aren't like a lot of pros to that. But there's also something very special about them getting to try to figure out themselves. And I'm excited to kind of see that.
Yeah, I am excited to see that too. I mean, selfishly, as just like a LeBron James fan and him being just a key part to my formative basketball fandom and just time becoming a fan of this team and leading me covering it. But LeBron fixes the biggest hole on this team that they've had since LeBron last left town. I mean, granted, it's a lot different of a beast. He has a lot more mileage on his body, as we talked about. Like, he is starting to show signs of age a little bit, and he is not breaking down, but like when he has an injury, he could sideline him for a lot longer than him just lacing up his shoe a little extra tighter and then running back down the floor with a full head of steam. He would fix a lot of the issues for the Cavs. I think there'd be a lot of interesting growing stuff with him and Garland, especially with Garland playing off ball. But like with how this Cavs team is constructed, if you just dropped LeBron James onto it, like it'd be one of the most talented rosters he's played with since probably the 2017 Cavs or possibly the championship Lakers, just with how well built that team was with Anthony Davis as his co-star. But I agree. I think if you're the Cavs, you are trying to build something special here. I think it's not an obsession, but the fact you're able to prove that, hey, we are more than just LeBron James carrying us to the playoffs and 5 finals appearances and 1 championship. There's more to it. Like, I'm not trying to be like a boomer here, but like there's something endearing to this team concept they do play in the emergence of these young stars that you've drafted and just traded for because the Rockets are too cheap to pay him, and Jared Allen. So like there's something fun there. And like you've said, and this quote's just kind of stuck with me too, it's when Jared Allen was talking during All-Star media availability, and he's just like, yeah, there's something like quietly they take pride in inside that locker room. Like, hey, we're the first team since the 97-98 Cavs to make the playoffs without LeBron. A lot of the guys in this team weren't alive when the 97-98 Cavs made the playoffs, which puts it even further into perspective. But there's something cool about that. And again, I think that just circles back to the Cavs just kind of saying, like, we are more... Like, yes, LeBron James is a huge part of our legacy as a franchise, especially in modern history, but we're much more than that. And it's kind of a way to say, like, maybe they're moving on and just forging their own identity.
There's a Darius Garland quote that I threw in here that has kind of stuck to me. He said this last year to The Athletic. quote, "Our guys want to make their own legacy. It's a new look, a new feel. It's a rebirth in Cleveland. It would mean a lot to all of us," is what he was talking about, like them making the playoffs without LeBron. And I think, the legacy, there is legacy that would come from playing with LeBron. I don't necessarily even think that, we can say, for sure that we can look at, the, maybe the reported Kyrie friction, right? And say, some of that, what happened again with, Darius or whatever, in terms of, him wanting to be his own man in that regard and, being young and thinking that, right? I don't think there's necessarily that kind of baked in there. What I do think is there is they are at this age, it seems where these guys do seemingly, and Jared Allen said this and he's done that. Evan doesn't really say, Evan Mobley doesn't say very much, but I would wonder how he feels about this. They seem they're at that age.
He'd be like, it's cool.
Yeah, he just shrugs. I would wonder, these guys feel they're at that age where it's we want to eat. There's that point when you're in your 20s before you kind of get a little bit older and the world beats you down a little bit. At least I'm speaking from my own personal experience. You want to try to eat
you're opening a sitcom too.
You want to eat the whole world. You want to just do it all yourself. You want to do everything. You want to do it without help, right? There's that push to do that for some people. I think it seems that for some of these guys I might be reading it too much in this a little bit. I probably am, but I think there's some of that here. It's we want to accomplish it ourselves and not feel we had to have LeBron James come back and do it. And I also I'm sure for the organization, the people that have worked there for a long time now, because of the consistency they've had through ups and downs, there's probably something there will probably be something vindicating for the non-player parts of this too, that they get to say you know what, we we accomplished something without having to have LeBron come back to help us do it. There's probably some real satisfaction in that at the end of the day.
I think there's also just an interesting aspect where you said LeBron coming to save us. The Cavs don't need that this time around. Last time when he came back from Miami, there was obviously the schism between the Heat and LeBron, but also the fact that the Cavs were floundering and they had a very frustrated Kyrie Irving on their roster. And then when LeBron came back, like Chris said, it became kind of his team. He called the shots. He approved a lot of the transactions his team made. The Cavs shifted things into overhaul then, and it became a title threat because LeBron just was given the okay on all the trades they made. But this time, the Cavs were, again, a win away from making the playoffs, and they lost to the Nets, which is a tough pull, and they lost to the Hawks, or more collapsed against the Hawks, and that's also a tough pull. So they're in a good spot, in a much dramatically different place than, let's say, last time LeBron came back when he left Miami.
I think the point that the Cavs are just actually in a good, the Cavs that if we look back with hindsight and without the rose-colored glasses of being Deion Waiters, I think that guy's good. Anthony Bennett will figure it out. All that stuff, right?
Samardo Samuel's weight loss is going to do big things for him this season. Semi Urden is a valuable center. The center rotation of Ryan Hollins and Semi Urden could be something with Tristan Thompson at power forward.
1 word, 2 words. Andrew Bynum.
I have 5 words. Anderson Varejao, pick and pop.
Those Cavs groups, in hindsight, I don't think they weren't going to go anywhere. They just weren't. We kind of knew. LeBron comes back and he puts his foot on the gas. They make the finals every year. Kyrie becomes amazing. They get Kevin Love, all that stuff. They win a lot because of LeBron. The infrastructure, he creates the infrastructure for that all to work, ultimately.
Yeah, he's the one who shows a lot of those younger guys how to be an adult in this situation, because it's stuff he inferred during his time with the Heat.
Yeah, and just think about how much roster churn you had, even among the guys that were quote-unquote the interesting prospects. Kyrie's the only one who really survives that purge. And Tristan. It's Kyrie and Tristan survive the purge. And, everyone else is...
For a second.
Yeah, and then, he gets more money and all that stuff. But, in terms of, the blue-chip prospects, I'm talking... Delly's a little different, because it's he was undrafted and all that stuff. But Kyrie and Tristan are these high picks. The other
Wiggins
ones for...
Bennett.
Yeah, Wiggins and Bennett traded to get Kevin Love. Wiggins kind of being the...
Tyler Zeller was traded to dump Jared Jack's contract.
Yes, all these things, they just churn over the roster. They're not... If you bring LeBron back, there is roster churn. But, Darius and Mobley and Allen are the reason LeBron James comes back in the first place. And just we should note this before we go into the last break today. LeBron does have a trade kicker in this contract, so anyone who wants to like hypothetically like think about contracts and think about like, okay, could the Cavs trade to bring him back, all of that stuff, he could waive the trade kicker. It also almost defeats the purpose of him coming back to try to win a title at like age 40.
Yeah,
if you have to trade like Jared, if you trade Jared Allen to do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I'm like, that sounds grim. Like, obviously, Jared Allen is the third member of this big three the Cavs assembled, but if you had to sacrifice one of those three, Jared probably the one to go. But, like, I just don't know if you do if you're Cleveland, because how feasible is a title run with a 40-year-old LeBron?
Look, maybe Evan Mobley, like, ascends to godhood and, like, all that stuff. It's very possible, but, like, again, it's part of you providing him something at this point that he was thus providing you. It changes the relationship about this a little bit. Okay, one last break. We're going to talk about if we're lying to ourselves when we say we don't want LeBron back as Clevelanders or and all that right after this. All right, last break. I'm going to shout out friend of the program, Ken Carmen, for tweeting this. I think it was maybe the Cavs LeBron tweet I thought about the most since this all kind of happened. What Ken tweeted was not wanting LeBron back was one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. Then he ranked the top 3 lies we tell ourselves. Love is 1. Happiness is 2. Not wanting LeBron back is 3.
I think that's a fair sentiment. Like, again, the fan of me and just like somebody who appreciates everything LeBron has done, just kind of like shaking my passion for this Cavs team. Like, I want him back. And like we talked about, it would be weird to see him retire as a Laker. It's like seeing like Patrick Ewing in a Raptors uniform or a Magic uniform in his last few years, or like Dikembe Mutombo playing for the Raptors at the end of his. The Raptors had a lot of old washed up dudes at the end of their careers, but I also just carry that feeling that if you dropped him onto this Cavs team right now, he would fix the problem at the 3, and it would be a very high octane fun team where there aren't those like awkward-ish flaws that the young baby Lakers had when LeBron first came there.
I think like anyone who tells them so, like, I think for the most part, there are probably some people who generally just like have never gotten over 2011 or feel about LeBron in a certain way or whatever. I tend to think that there is nothing more, especially as I've gotten like, I am like spiritually old, but I'm not like old yet. As I've gotten like older, I said that
to you at dinner the other night.
I've always been spiritually.
You're like 70.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything cooler than getting to see like the people who are the very, very best at what they do, like get to operate. And like I'm not excited about like observing the Cleveland Browns this year, let's say. You can wonder why. I'm going to see Tom Brady playing Cleveland because I want to be like, you know what, I saw Tom Brady. I talked to my dad about this a lot. It's like there's guys that he didn't get to see. He saw Jordan once, but he's like I never saw Larry. I never like went and saw Magic. Like he's like there's NFL guys from the 90s I never went and saw. Like there's just like seeing greatness like that is something we can never, I think, fully take for granted. Sports are ultimately one of these like really cool communal experiences. And I think like seeing one of the greatest players, the greatest player who will ever play for the Cleveland Cavaliers, full stop, getting to see him like play again in that environment would be incredible. And like, yes, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. There's a lot of drama that comes with it that is like, frankly, annoying. Like, it is a one-of-one thing to have that guy in your city and get to observe him and for us to get to cover him, for fans to get to root for him. That is a one-of-one irreplaceable experience. So I think Ken's right. Like I think if you like give a darn about the Cleveland Cavaliers and you just are invested
just
in like
a fan of sports in general,
or just, but I'm saying in the context of this city, like of this specific city, if you are in our little Lake Erie thing. If you are like invested in watching basketball in this city, or you're like a diehard fan or whatever, I understand there's the impulse to, and I already made the case that like basketball wise, structurally, business wise, there's a lot of reason why like maybe it's just better for this to let dead be dead. But like there's just something irreplaceable about the idea of like LeBron James wearing like a number 23 Cavs jersey again and like playing another like having another finals, or just the specter of that will be something you can never recreate. And when it's gone, it's going to be gone, and it's going to be gone very, very soon.
So to your business side of things, I think the Cavs would want him back just for jersey sales, and like you said, it would be a 23 out of 6 just because the NBA has retired 6 after Bill Russell's passing. But I agree with you, and I just think yes, there's in the Cleveland bubble, but maybe just because as I've gotten older, and I think again when Kobe died, a lot of this came into perspective for me that like life is precious, and I'm getting a little meta with this one, obviously, but also just through the lens of sports, meta. Like there's so many great players I've seen in my lifetime. I've seen Tom Brady play. He's the greatest football player of all time, and I'm sure older fans could maybe make an argument for Jerry Rice if they wanted to, but like Tom Brady's unequivocally the GOAT. We were growing up, like obviously in the heyday of the Bulls, but like our formative memories are more so towards the tail end of his time with the Bulls, and then just the weird time with the Wizards. But like Michael Jordan was around for our lifetime. LeBron James, like you said, Sidney Crosby is one of the greatest hockey players ever. Shohei Ohtani has the potential to be one of like the most unique baseball players since Babe Ruth, just because of how he plays the game. Like there's so many great talented players that you and I have got to see growing up, and I think I agree with you where I'm getting older, like I'm gonna have a family soon, and it would be cool to share that experience with my children at least. Like, hey, check it out, this is arguably, like you said, either the second greatest player of all time, or at least the greatest player of all time in my opinion, playing with the team he started with and still doing big things, because I think LeBron will still have gas in the tank when he's at 40. Maybe not as much as he does now, and especially not as much as he did with the Cavs the second or the first time around, or especially the second time around. But it's something I appreciate just as a fan of the sport, where like life is short and you have to appreciate a lot of things. So like when you see true greatness and like true experts of their craft who are like the peak of their position in the best league in the world, there's something cool about that. And if you get to enjoy it in your hometown, that makes it even more special.
I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me 5 athletes that you haven't seen in person that you would like to see in person. I can go first if you'd like time to think about it, because I think about this more than I'd like to admit.
You go first. I failed to mention Ken Griffey Jr. as well, but like that's another great baseball player during Chris and I's like childhood and just now for our time reference. But you go. I gotta ponder this for a sec.
All right, one that I'm very jealous of. Friend of the program, Jeff Phenomena, just got to do this. He just saw Sue Bird play in Chicago. That's one that I really regret not like going to New York and seeing her play the Liberty or something. I think would have been incredible. Taurasi, I think unless she comes back next year, might fall in that other well. But I've like those two are just one of one. Candace Parker probably falls that in as well. My official answer, just because I think there's a chance I'll be able to still see her play and like as it coming down to the end is Taurasi, because one of one. Unsurprisingly, soccer-wise, because some of these ones I don't think I'll get to see unless it's a World Cup. Like Messi, obviously, is an obvious one, but Erling Haaland would be one. Heung-min Son from Tottenham would be one. Shohei Ohtani in baseball is kind of like an obvious one, even though like the Angels crack me up, because every time I see a tweet about the Angels, they've like Ohtani hit 3 home runs and pitched 7 innings and they lost like 2-1 or something. And it's like, just how are you guys?
Such a frustrating organization. They have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani.
You have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, and you're just inept. So let's just say those 4 so far would be Taurasi, Harry Kane, or Heung-min Son, Erling Haaland, Shohei Ohtani, and then there's not really an NBA one anymore, because I think I've seen pretty much everyone in person aside from some of the rookies.
You could Saul Goodman this and build a time machine and pull a historical player if you want.
Oh, shots to my guy. I'll give 2 historical examples. I think Bill Russell for me would be one. And I think baseball-wise, I would want to see Roberto Clemente. I had a very large obsession with Roberto Clemente as a kid. I read like all these Roberto Clemente books, fascinated with the way he gave back and his tragic death and all of that. So I would say Roberto Clemente.
I like those picks. I'll give my historical ones. I think they're my current ones right now. Historically, I'd like to see Arvydas Sabonis. Like, if I was able to be a fly on the wall inside the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Bloc and watch him play, like, he's just he scratches an itch for me in terms of just like a do-it-all center. Like, Bill Russell's in a similar vein for that. For me, I think Roberto Clemente is a great pick, but I would like to have seen like Barry Sanders in his prime, or Bo Jackson as well. Like, if he just had that, like when he ran down Brian Bosworth, like, I'd love to be there for that game in person because I feel like the atmosphere would just be electric there. But just like players I want to see live now, I think Sue Bird's an excellent pick. Like, I think like Shohei Ohtani also is an excellent pick too. Like Diana Taurasi, great. I wish I could have seen Serena Williams in person before she finally hung it up.
Well, she's not retired officially yet. She's not. Like,
I know, but
yet.
like I know she's not completely gone yet, but it's at least widely believed she's retiring, and like that would be something. Just, you know, again, one of the greatest at their craft. Just watching them play in a sport they truly love, like that would be something I'd really enjoy to see. Michael Phelps, like if he was still in his prime, like that'd be fun too, just because that's like one of the most dominant Olympic athletes ever. Hockey is just like, you want to just appreciate like what the Penguins have, because they are an interesting case study of, they have really like a core like three, like at least with him, with Crosby and Malkin, like you'd like to watch them play because you don't know how much longer they have just as a group. Football right now, I feel like that's tricky. Like Tom Brady, like, is my answer. Obviously, like I'd love to see Tom Brady play in person and just like watch him be a fly on the wall and just like watch him dissect film, or just like learn him. Like, if I really had like the full like reap of benefits of just in taking everything in, it's just, I don't know. It's a hard list. I think like Dame Lillard, like seeing him in person was incredible too. Like just players like that, like seeing LeBron play, watching Kevin Durant play, like in the arena, like the atmosphere that there's around them and the electricity in the air. Seeing Zion in Cleveland for the first time was like a spectacle for me, just because like you knew he was a large colossus of a human at Duke, and then you see him in person, you're like, that's not natural for a 19-20-year-old to look like that, but he does. And that's just what's neat about sports, is just there's so many good and talented and great players that the list could go on forever and ever.
Yeah, this is our way of saying that if you have the funds and can make it work, like maybe go see LeBron play in Cleveland this year when the Lakers are in top, because it'll last. Well, I don't think it'll be his last, but it will be a spectacle. It's just always a spectacle. It's just always something with that. All right, but that's going to be it for today. I want to thank you for making a Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. This episode was produced by Jake Stevens. Again, check out Astro Radio, their music you heard on the way, and check them out and support them. We're going to be back on Wednesday. We're going to have Brad Sellers from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. He's going to come through a bunch this season, doing some little hits with us, but we're going to do a full 30-minute episode with him for his debut. We're going to talk about Colin Sexton and other Cavs topics. Brad, obviously NBA veteran, Ohio native, all of that stuff. He's been great to get to talk with him off the pod. Excited to have him come through on the pod. So check that out on Wednesday. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. I'm Chris. That's Evan. Thanks again to producer Jake. Tweet us your top 5 athletes you would like to see in person as well at Locked On Cavs, and or as a side thing, top 3 Cavs you could go back in a time machine and see in their prime if you didn't get to see them because it was like you saw LeBron. It's like, would you want to see Mark Price or Doherty or Austin Carr at Notre Dame? Let us know at Locked On Cavs. Everyone, be well.